Well, friendships turn on priority of needs, so that if my priorities are met by you, then I sort of, almost by definition, have you as my great friend. And in marriage, you're doing this mutually with each other, ideally. If at some point one of the two partners has a priority of needs that are not just not met, not met by one's partner, then the friendship is dissolved. If it's not dissolved, then you battle on to behave as if they were priority, in spite of the fact that you rate something else as more important to you. Well, if you do that genuinely, yes, then the relationship, the marriage in this case, will continue. If you don't, and give priority to that other priority might be of godliness, which is not consistent with what your partner wants of you, perhaps. And therefore, if you give this your priority, then the marriage is in effect dissolved, isn't it? Well, if God is our true priorities, then in what sense can you give that priority to anyone else? You can't, you see? So what you might then call a marriage in such circumstances, where one of you is giving priority to God and perhaps the other is, or perhaps the other isn't, then you may be very civilized towards your partner in spite of your main priority being God, or because of it in some sense, that you are relating to him in the way that, as you see it, God would have you relate to him. I don't mean him, or I mean him or her, you know. This may not suit your partner, of course. They may feel that your love for them is actually contaminated, not blessed by such, because they're not particularly prioritizing your God like you are. Now, this may be why, those in heaven are as the angels of God in heaven. They neither marry nor are given in marriage, because they are devoted to God. Does that mean we all appear as loners in the world? Well, no, because God loves and cares for all. And therefore, if you like, we bear this in mind in our relationships with all those around us, that God loves this person. Are they in some sense robbed of you loving them for themselves? You're loving them because God loves them. I don't think so quite, or at least let me argue that no, you still love them, and in fact in a godly way now, instead of a way that doesn't prioritize God. that in fact to love them in a way that prioritizes God means that you love them in some sense in the way that God loves them. And your God is the perfection or personification of your true values, you see. So that should be good, but of course your partner may not see it that way. They may, unless of course they prioritize God in their life, and it's the same as your God, of course. If it's different, well, we've really got a clash, haven't we? So, for the two to stay together, they've got to be loving the same God. Their view of God's got to move together. That's no good, him going to the Catholic Church and her going to the Pentecostal. Well, actually, you might manage it with the Pentecostal because the Catholics have got a renewal movement, which is really, did have anyway, which was Pentecostal, really, and they got on very well. Certainly the meetings I used to go to in the crypt, is it? No, not quite. The meetings anyway in the Liverpool Catholic Church on a Friday night used to be under the cathedral in the sort of power room, all the pipes and that underneath the floor of the main cathedral, and they were fantastic meetings, more Pentecostal and charismatic than you can imagine. Yeah. Anyway, that's an aside. Well, if we don't have the same God, then we're singularly related to our gods. But if we have the same God, well, we'd be very happy about this because you're prioritizing God and me prioritizing God means that, well, it sounds like we're in perfect sync with each other. I mean, it's the only true marriage, in fact. But not necessarily a marriage of in the way that we understand it here, because, well, we're talking about in some sense in the kingdom of heaven, not physically on earth, and God loves all people, all life, and we do that also. Well, if that is the God we're talking about, of course. It's the one that, if you like, interests me. So, we're still as the angels of God in heaven. I mean, it's not a physical world we're talking about, right? It's a spiritual. Quite honestly, it's in realms that we don't know much about, do we? It's as simple as that. Except that it's probably not very much like this world here, which is an astonishing mix of good and evil, of course. At least to appearances, to us.